everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO at AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to This Week at Work, the only show to pack workplace news, practical HR solutions, and timely insights into every 30-minute episode. It's Thursday, October 24th, episode 301. Today, when disaster strikes or missteps make headlines, where does HR stand? From emergency preparedness to cleaning up after unhinged leaders, you won't want to miss this crucial conversation on HR's impact when it matters most. This show is brought to you by AIM Employers Association, live every Thursday morning, so you can regularly connect with their experts and get your legal questions addressed by Ogletree Deacons. And now, it's time for This Week at Work.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Happy to be here with you today. Bert, good morning. How are we doing today over there where you're at?
Doing well, Phil, doing well. We've got our firm seminar managing a workforce all day today at the Ritz-Carlton here in Clayton, and we're looking forward to a great program.
Yeah, I know we will be in attendance there. So thank you always for that invite. That's a great program. I know it's a place where your clients, our members, always are mixing with the attorneys here in St. Louis, and having attended many times myself, it's a wonderful program. So for our listeners who are going to be there, get out there and say hello to Bert and tell him how much you like the program. All right. Bert, we got a lot of things to talk about today, and I like this segment we're going to talk about in the news. But before we do that, let's get our poll question kicked off here, which is the poll question today. We'd love your participation. Which HR influence has the greatest impact in preventing or stabilizing workplace hardships? We have crisis communication, emergency preparedness, leadership training, employee well-being, and legal compliance. Bert, I know you might vote for legal compliance there, but we'll see what our members think when they listen to this. But we'd love to have your comments as well if there's something there you'd like to comment on. You ready for Lawyer on the Clock, Bert?
You know I am, Phil.
All right. Nick, let's pull that lever.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
Phil, we got just a handful of topics today that I want to get through real quickly before we get to our other segments. And the first one, our Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals here in Missouri, the federal Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals that's based here in Missouri, is set to weigh a pretty significant issue. And it's going to be weighed before the full Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. And they're going to decide whether an employer defense is applicable in Americans with Disabilities Act lawsuits. The Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit's 11 active judges are set to hear oral argument today in a case involving a Hardee's restaurant manager who said she was fired because of her diabetes. The restaurant originally won the case on summary judgment at the district court level, and then on appeal, it was overturned in a 2-1 decision, which meant that the Hardee's restaurant was going to have to face the claim of an Americans Disability Act trial, and a jury would decide whether Hardee's violated the law or not. In this particular case, there's a doctrine out there called the honest belief doctrine. And under that doctrine, that shields a company from workplace bias claims if the company can offer a legitimate reason for a firing or other adverse job action that was based on incorrect information that they reasonably believed to be true at the time. Okay.
All right. So let's break that down. Meaning, with the information I have, I believe the data that I have is what I have, and I'm making a decision on that data. Whether that data is completely accurate or not, that's the honest belief doctrine, meaning
that's right.
I made the decision based upon those facts.
Yep. I honestly believe these to be the facts, and that's what I made the decision on. The company should have provided for some additional relief or consideration of the absence that led to the termination, or the reasons for the absence that led to the termination.
Yeah. Now, I know many of our members will have, and I've had them when I was practicing HR. We had no call, no show policies, where, you know, if you were a 2-day or 3-day consistent no call, no show, or after your second no call, no show, you were terminated. I wonder, is that putting that practice as it sits by itself in isolation at risk, meaning you can't or shouldn't make a decision on termination based on one instance or two instances of no call, no show alone. You should investigate.
Yeah, I think that you can make a decision, but I think that that decision is subject to being revisited in certain circumstances if the employer gains more information down the road. And an example of that might be, say you have an employee who gets into a terrible car accident on a Sunday night, and then doesn't report to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Nobody's heard from this employee. And that's because the employee is literally comatose in a hospital. The employee can't call in. So the honest belief doctrine would say, well, we honestly believe the employee abandoned the job, and so we made the decision. If the employee later comes back from the coma, wants to return to work, as soon as they come out of the coma, they have a family member reach out to the employer, let the employer know what happened. I think a prudent employer would want to possibly reconsider that decision.
Yeah, and it sounds like in this case, it's the employer is aware that the person was struggling with a serious illness of diabetes and maybe didn't take that into account in its decision. And I think the tough part for that, particularly for business owners and HR professionals, is, and I'm not saying this is the case every time, but many times, you know, we get frustrated with people who are gaming this system, trying to, you know, determine when is someone gaming the system, or when are they using the system to their advantage and the employer's disadvantage, and what is the employer to do, right? And that, I'm not saying that's the case here, but I know that's the struggle that we deal with. And I think that's when it's right for an employer to get into conversation, you know, with our advisors or your legal team, and make sure that, you know, we're covering all angles when we make that decision.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tread carefully.
Yeah. Well said. What else you got there, Mr. Lawyer on the clock?
All right. So, you know, Phil, you mentioned in the opening that it's, or maybe Nick mentioned in the opening that it's election season. I thought it'd be a good time to very quickly
We got an election coming up.
Yeah, I'm hearing some buzz about that out there, just a little.
Who are the candidates anyway?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? So I thought that it'd be a good time to cover the election laws. I know that we're primarily focused on our audience here in Missouri, in Illinois, and then audience members in Indiana and Florida. So just as a refresher for all of our folks listening, you could see there's a map that I have pulled off of Ogletree Deacon's client portal that shows the states that have voting laws, voting leave laws, and states that don't. You can see for our Florida and Indiana folks that the state does not have a voting leave law, which means that I would strongly encourage employers in those states to allow employees to take a little bit of time off work to vote, maybe come in late, leave a little bit early to vote if they don't have time to vote outside of working hours. So in those states, that's how I would handle it. Missouri and Illinois, however, do have voting leave laws, and the Missouri law says employers must allow eligible voters to take up to 3 hours of paid leave to vote unless the employee has 3 consecutive non-working hours before or after their regularly scheduled working hours to do so. The employees must request voting leave prior to Election Day, and the employer may specify which hours can be taken. Okay, so
Okay.
I want to make that very clear. In Missouri, Illinois, employers must allow employees to take 2 hours of paid leave to vote during working hours if the employee's working hours begin less than 2 hours after the opening of the polls and end less than 2 hours before the closing of the polls. Employers may specify the time period for such leave. The employees must request the leave prior to the date of the election.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
think a couple of things there is in both states, while the time frame is different, both of them require advance request and notice.
that is
And
correct.
let's just practice this out loud for a minute. You know, if the polls are open at 6 in the morning and my shift starts at 8 and I work until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, but the polls are open until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, there would be no reason for me to accommodate because I have at least 4 hours in that scenario to get to the polls and vote.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
So one other caveat, Phil, for Illinois, though, I want to mention that Illinois, we've talked about it on the program recently. This year, it went into effect. Illinois has what we like to refer to as the Paid Leave for All Workers Act, or Paid Leave for Any Reason Act, as I like to call it. Illinois requires covered employers to provide employees with paid leave that can be used for any reason. And an election would be any reason. So keep that in mind in Illinois.
Now, and put that aside, me using my earned time off in the state of Illinois, this doesn't mean that the employer has to provide paid leave if the person is assigned to work voting polls or they volunteered to campaign, on the steps of the voting building before that. This is to vote, not to support a candidate or a position.
Definitely not to support a candidate. Missouri does have a leave law associated with being a poll worker. And whether Illinois has one of those or not, I'm not sure. I don't believe they do.
Okay. Yeah. Good stuff.
Right.
Yep.
Now,
That's
while
going to
we're
be
on the
important for us to remember for, I guess, 2 weeks now?
Yeah, exactly.
Just under
A little
2
less
weeks.
than. Yep. And now it's interesting with the applicability of these laws with so much early voting taking place in most states these days. You would think that an employee would be able to find time to vote, early vote, and not invoke these laws. But make sure you take that into consideration as well. And I mentioned, Phil, the Illinois Paid Leave for All Workers Act, not to be outdone. Not to be outdone at all. On a lighter note here, and by the way, it's a lighter note, but this is definitely something I can get behind here. The New York City Council has proposed
Wait a minute. I got to stop you. You're
right.
going to get behind something that's going on in New York City.
I can get behind this one, Phil. I kind of like this idea.
Okay, I'm tuned in.
All right. So this New York City Council proposal would give workers time off for pet care. I mean, that seems completely reasonable to me.
I know you could get behind that. I wonder, does pet care mean my dogs have escaped? They've run a mile or two down the road through the neighborhood and are having a chicken dinner in someone's backyard.
It might mean that this law as proposed would basically mean that it would cover service animals and, quote, any animal kept primarily for companionship in compliance with all applicable laws, and would allow people to take time off to care for pets or service animals under that bill. Not sure if caring for those animals would cover my dogs escaping again and going and raiding somebody's chickens in their backyard, but I would like to think it would.
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions on that one, but I'm going to keep them to myself because I'm not sure most of our listeners would agree with them. However, I do want to share, we were stuck in the hurricane not that long ago, came through Central Florida, and we were in a hotel there. And many of the people that came to check into the hotel came to get away from, low-lying lands or to be extra safe, in a big, strong hotel building, and they brought their pets. Of course, their pets could not be left unattended. Now, everyone brought dogs, to the best of my knowledge. I didn't see any cat lovers there. But it was interesting as we were all sitting in the lobby and the power is out and there wasn't anything to do. The number of people that would allow their pets to get up on the hotel furniture, like the couch, the chairs, the sofas in the hotel lobby. And I don't know, I just found that to be a little bit disrespectful. But that's me, and some people don't buy into the fact that I'm a respectful pet owner myself in that way. But I just found that I could only see my dad going, "Get your dog off of that couch." Yeah.
That went too far for you.
Yeah, that one went too far.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. All
That's
right.
what I got
else?
for you.
All right. That's a good conversation, Bert. You got some time to do a Filbert forum with me this morning?
We haven't done Filbert's forum in a while, of course.
Yeah. Well, Nick's put together some good stuff. And you remember Jeff Foxworthy?
I do.
Yeah, Jeff Foxworthy was "You Might Be a Redneck If," right?
Yeah.
So we're going to do a little segment play off of that you might be a bad boss if, right? So here's one for you, Bert. If you've canceled more vacation requests than meetings, you might be a bad boss.
That one, that would be an indicator. I've got another one for you, Phil. How about if you think the best time to correct your subordinate is at the company picnic, you might be a bad boss.
Ah, that's a good one. I like it. And I might be guilty of that. I don't know. If you think a servant leader's responsibility is to teach employees how to brew the best coffee, you might be a bad boss.
I would think that would qualify. How about if you think you avoiding micromanaging by just helping with every step, you might be a bad boss.
Well, that one you might be, but I'm probably guilty of that, saying, "You got this, go away and do what you think." And then 5 minutes later, I'm right behind saying, "Now don't forget to do A, B, C,
Right.
D," and micromanaging that one. So I probably fall into that category. All right, we got one more we'll finish with here. If your staff knows more about your value to the softball team than their value to the business, you might be a bad boss.
Little one-sided conversations there, I think, huh? A little bragging.
A little bragging. All right. And boy, does that happen sometimes. That's good stuff. Thank you there, producer Nick. That's Filbert's Forum. All right, Bert. Today's program is really centered around headlines and HR in the news. And there is a lot of circumstance where HR ends up in the news or employee relations issues end up in the news. And I want to talk about one with you here. And that's our first headline is the family of a factory worker who died in Hurricane Helene flooding sues and claims that the bosses were able to leave and survive while they made the employees stay and work to meet production demand. So I don't know if you've heard about this one, but the suit claims that workers were forced to stay at the factory despite flood warnings to meet production deadlines while senior management allegedly escaped through the back door. It goes on and it tells just a horrible story about how someone got trapped in flood water and their text back to their daughter was, "I love you," because they were so afraid. And it was the last anyone ever heard of the individual. Now, one reason why I like this particular headline, I don't like the outcome, let's be clear about that, is that we have had some significant hurricanes come through the country recently. It's done some terrible damage. We have tornadoes that enter other parts of our country that do terrible damage. And we've seen even in the Amazon case here in our neighborhood just a few years ago where, the workers were not able to take cover appropriately, and part of the building collapsed and killed several people at an Amazon facility. So these things happen, and basically what happens is we don't have the proper emergency preparedness plan. But first of all, Bert, let me just ask, have you heard about that first headline?
I hadn't until I was prepping for the show today.
Okay, so a horrible situation. There are some things that we could do proactively, and that is developing a comprehensive evacuation plan. We can train our employees and our managements on disaster protocols. And I think the key thing there is that most people are focused on production demands and meeting responsibilities, and sometimes we don't anticipate how bad the weather may get. And it is good to have a set of guidelines that's going to help us through that, because we never know if it's just another over-exaggerated news event or if it's going to be something of significance. And I just told you about a situation where we were in Orlando and we were in the hurricane as it came through Central Florida there. And I'll just share with you some of the things that we did is, first, once we realized, yep, the hurricane was going to come through our area, we talked together as a team to discuss, what were our options. And everyone that we were there with, it was my leadership team, they all had an option to make any decision that they felt was important to them. They could leave. We didn't have a lot of flight options, but we also were very safe in a high-rise hotel building with, no real severe threat to us. But in that case, the decision we made is we let everyone make that decision on their own. What was best for them? What is their tolerance to the risk based upon the news and what we're hearing? And I thought that was, the right decision for us to make versus me trying to make that decision on their behalf. And we do that same thing when it comes to bad weather. We allow people to, make the decision for themselves as whether or not they think they can or cannot come into work, because we do still encourage people to come into the office on a daily basis. Is there anything else you would add to that, Bert, either proactively or reactively?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Phil, when you said that you have to have emergency or contingency type plans in place, and the time to do those things is before an emergency strikes.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, and hopefully then you don't have to worry about being reactive.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway here is the lack of leadership. That the leaders fled while the subordinate workers were made to come in to work. And I think that if the leaders wanted to get out of town or hunker down wherever they were, that's something that should have been offered to the other employees. I think from a legal perspective, I'm not sure that this suit will actually stick. But if it does, I sure wouldn't want to be in front of a jury with these facts.
Yeah, that one might pull the heartstrings quite a bit, particularly if it is true that the leader said you must stay, and hey, we're sneaking out, and doing the backdoor exit. Let's talk about this other one here. How about Meta fires employee making $400,000 per year over a $25 meal voucher? So apparently the news is the employee allegedly ordered food for his or her friends, I'm not sure, using the voucher, which violated company policy. This incident has sparked discussion about Meta's internal policies and employee conduct, particularly around expense management and ethics. Any thoughts on this one, Bert?
Yeah, I had seen this headline and read an article about it, and I think that it comes down to, Phil, we've always talked in the past about the notions of consistency and fairness, and if they misused a company voucher, that is in essence like a form of theft, and I think that basically that if the company's being consistent and doesn't tolerate theft of company funds or property, then from a consistency standpoint, they probably did what was right. From a fairness standpoint, I'm not so sure, but consistency, which I put above fairness usually, I think that they probably did the correct thing here, even though this is a very harsh result.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of companies, and I've worked for them. I've been part of the policies when it comes to theft, zero tolerance. Doesn't matter how little, what type, what reason necessarily, you're not allowed to steal. And sometimes this is considered a form of stealing or misuse of company property, as you mentioned it. And I can see where individuals feel like, oh, that's not fair.
Right.
It's $25. Come on. You're a big corporation, you can afford that. But I mean, at what point is it then not okay? And in that case, I start with $1, and you're not allowed to steal, period, or misuse company money with intent, knowing that you were misusing it. Now, if it was done in mistake, that's different.
Yeah, I think the prudent thing here, and I'm not quite sure what happened, but would be for the company to conduct a very thorough investigation of the incident before making the decision to discipline or terminate. Other things, depending on whether it was some sort of a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of the company's policy on these vouchers, maybe lesser discipline, followed by clarification of the policy would have been warranted, but we'll have to see what shakes out with this one if a claim is ultimately brought.
All right. You got time for one more?
Sure. Let's do one more, Phil.
All right. So we got one more here. This one involves the NLRB ruling. And apparently a former Starbucks CEO broke labor law, is being claimed, by telling an unhappy employee, go work for another company. Now, the incident occurred in 2022 when an employee raised concerns about unfair labor practices and unionization. Schultz's comments were deemed to not necessarily
be coercive.
Yeah, there you go.
Threatening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Starbucks disagrees with the ruling, but has stated its commitment to respecting employees' rights to organize. So we've seen a lot about Starbucks in the news. I will tell you, in so many words and in so many ways, encourage people who are not happy in the job that they're in to go and find a job that would make them more happy. We talk about being outrageously engaged here at AIM. And if you're not outrageously engaged, I really don't want you to stay working for us. And I want you to go find a job that's going to make you happy and fulfilled in your day. So this one's interesting to me because we've seen and we hear many bosses say, if you don't like it, you can go work somewhere else.
Well, you just added another word there, Phil, that I think is important. The headline that you keep seeing out there, and the one that you mentioned is that the CEO allegedly told employees to go work for another company. There's a difference about saying go to work for another company versus you can go to work for another company. The can means something there. So it wasn't threatening the employee's job. It was telling the employee, you have an option if you're not happy here. So this ruling came out just a couple of weeks ago by the National Labor Relations Board. And my strong hunch is that if Starbucks appeals this into the court system, this is never going to hold up. I think this is an administrative law judge's decision from the National Labor Relations Board, an NLRB judge who said that this was an unfair labor practice, a coercive statement. And like I said, again, if this gets appealed into the court systems, I don't think the courts would allow this to stand. This was not a threat, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to avoid, is threatening employees' jobs and employment working conditions because of their concerted activity, of course.
Exactly. If you tell an employee, if you're not happy here, you can go somewhere else, that's informing employees of their option. That's not threatening them with termination.
That's right. That's right. All right, Bert. Hey, good program today. Thanks for joining me as always. I know you got a great lineup at your conference there. I wish you all the best of luck. I'm sorry I can't be there. We have a board meeting tomorrow, so I won't be able to attend today. But thank you as always for the invite. We will be back here next week at 7:30 Central Time. So until then, let's go out and be good to somebody. Take care.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere you are. Don't forget you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.